Oh, it shows it on your end. It doesn't
We
even
are
show it on my
live.
end.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
We're
well,
live.
welcome, welcome everyone. We are back for another Facebook Live with Dr. Nelva Bryant. And, I'm very excited about today's conversation. Well, I love when we have two doctors in the house because the
Mhm.
conversation is completely different. And there's even, I believe, there's always great information that goes out, but when you have two doctors in the house, it's just a different, I like
I,
to say, atmosphere.
I think so because we kind of bounce off each other too in a lot of
Yep.
ways. Same as when we had Dr. Chrisman. When he was here, we were just going backwards and forward. It's kind of like we're all in this secret little society together, and we kind of see eye to eye on everything. We just bounce off each other. So it's
Yes,
gonna be a good
yes,
one today, definitely.
absolutely. So she's coming in a little bit, and in thinking about her, I wanted to, well, actually, in a conversation you and I had previously, I really think this is probably a good time to bring it up because we were talking about the things that pet parents should be aware of
Mhm.
with the fall. And so, of course, the weather is nice. And in the summertime, people got to be aware of the, hot cars, the hot asphalt, the, everything about hurting your animal with the heat. Well, now that the fall's here, you would think
Mhm.
that there's nothing to be aware of, but there is.
Mhm.
And we were talking about deer ticks and
Yeah.
still any other little creatures that could bite not only our pets, cats, dogs, anything else you want to walk in the grass, but they can also bite us as pet
Right.
parents.
Right.
So, let's just talk a little bit about that before we bring the doctor into the house.
Yeah.
And
I'll share something personal, and it hit home with me. My mom actually recently got bit by, I believe, it was a deer tick. She saw something on her, didn't think much of it, and thought it was a scab, and figure if it's a scab, leave it alone. And then the next day, she realized it grew. So she started messing with it, realized it had legs, and she got it off her quickly. But guess what? It was on long enough to cause a problem. And like you
yeah,
said, it hits home because my mom actually she sought medical treatment, but she was not given the adequate dose initially of the doxycycline, and
mm,
she a few days later developed extreme joint pain to the point where she had difficulty walking. And
yeah.
if you know my mom is, she may be older, she doesn't look it, but my mom, she can outdo anybody here. She's just always fitting on the go. So for her to be that sore and that painful and unable, actually at one point just too painful to walk, that was really devastating for our whole family. Thank God she sought medical treatment. They have her on doxycycline. All those, some of the diagnostic tests were negative, but I was like, Mom, continue with doxycycline. And guess what? A week later, she's back to her normal self. Maybe a little achy painy, but she's back to her normal activities, which is wonderful. So I
Thank goodness.
all this to say yes. And you said you shared your dad also had a situation like that, right?
Absolutely. And this is years ago when the big scare of the, tick Lyme disease was coming out
Mhm.
up in Pennsylvania. And, my dad, sadly to say, just to share something with you guys, so I was the only, animal lover and tree hugger in my family, as my dad and all his brothers and all that stuff, they all hunt. So my dad was out in the woods, and I joked, and when he ended up in the hospital, and he
Mhm.
was in the hospital for a week with this.
Mhm.
And so I joked with him. I said, so the deer sent out their little army of deer ticks to get you, so you couldn't get them. And that was the running joke. But
Right.
it took a grown man down for like a week, and he said it's like a horrible case of arthritis all over your body.
Mhm.
He said that's the best way to describe it. After some treatments, plenty of fluids, treatments like medications and stuff, because I don't remember that far back what they were. He definitely got over it, but Lyme disease is nothing to play with.
Yeah.
And I remember when it was like almost, it was spreading badly in Pennsylvania, that it was making the news just about every night in November. So, when this time of the year, when humans go walking, you have to be aware.
Right.
Just look on yourself, look on your dog, because they're smaller than regular ticks.
Right.
The deer ticks, they're smaller than regular ticks. But the Lyme disease that they carry is very,
No joke.
it's a hard thing to battle.
I would say if we can pull that in and tie it in with travel, I would say if you're traveling, make sure your pet has something to protect it against ticks, flea and tick prevention.
Yeah.
I personally, there's oral medication you can give that's also kills fleas or ticks. But I actually use a Seresto collar for my dog. Plus that because the Seresto collar kills it comes in contact with your pet's fur, it kills them. So I would just recommend probably something more topical to ensure that they're treated for fleas and ticks. And also depending on the environment where you're going to as well, might even look into getting a Lyme vaccine for your pets as well. So just a thought. But again, traveling is just something to consider, especially going, and again, it could be routine travel, could be going hiking, could be traveling out of state by car, could be flying to a different location. Just be aware, ticks are out, fleas are out too, but ticks have the tick-borne parasitic diseases that unfortunately we can get. And the ticks don't discriminate. Blood is blood. They're attracted to CO2 that we give off. So it could be an animal or it could be a human. So just protect your pet so that you can protect yourself in the process.
Yeah, and just to let people know, ticks are active until you have your winter months. And when I say winter, I'm not talking about our friends down here in Georgia where there's no winter. I'm talking about where you have frost and when you have snow. So, once it gets into the 30s and belows, that's when the ticks and stuff go dormant, and you can go outside and run around. But really fall, spring, and summer, or anything that's above 40 degrees, you're going to find ticks and any other bugs that'll bite. And it's like, when we were talking about this, I was like, wow, there's just so much you have to be aware of and prepare for when you're traveling with your dog. And the thing is, you just brought up, you don't have to plan a trip out to Africa. It's just literally hiking, in your neighborhood, or, if you want to go to the mountains, that might be in another state over, or even in your own state. Anywhere that there is grass, number one, anywhere that there is woods, even more, anywhere there's trees, you have, and your pet has the ability to get bit, and that can be a problem.
Oh yeah, definitely. Glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
And, it was scary for our family. That's all I can say. I'm so happy my mom is doing a lot better and recovering. So, but again, to protect everyone else out there, just be mindful of that particular thing that could happen. So be prepared.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, today, I'm going to segue this into today. We've got two doctors here along with me. So we're going to have a nice, great conversation. But the difference with them is that they're talking about nutrition. And remember, we talked initially, we were saying nutrition. How does nutrition play into pet travel? And actually is huge because we don't think about it because, if I travel, hey, I already know I'm going to eat, whatever I can eat, it doesn't matter. I can eat whatever and I'm fine. But what if, there are some people that are on restricted diets, but more importantly, what if your pet has a restricted diet? What if, you can't just give your pet people food, all these things that can happen during travel. You don't want to have any vomiting or diarrhea during travel. That's the worst thing ever. So Dr. Megan reached out and said, hey, there's many things you guys can do as far as nutrition and how it relates to animal travel. So she's going to enlighten us all. And definitely, you got anything else further before you introduce her, Greta?
No. So since we're going to have two of them, I figured let's get them both
and
on
actually,
here.
Dr. Megan, and I'll meet someone new, Dr. Mary, because I have never met you, Dr. Mary.
I know.
Yeah, looking forward to you guys coming on and just sharing the conversation.
Absolutely. So let's bring them on, and then I can do their introductions, and then we can get right into it. So let's see. Now you might have to bring them on, Dr. Bryant, because it's not letting me.
Nope. Well, hold on. Let's see. I will add Megan. How's that? Yes.
Okay.
Perfect. Wonderful.
And now we have to add Dr. Mary on here.
No. She's on. She's on.
Oh, she's on? Okay, I only see 3. So that's why I was like, what's going on? Okay, as long as we have all 4.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, Dr. Mary and Dr. Megan, oh my gosh, we're so happy to have you. You have to, you just got to flow with us because we are the professional unprofessional team where we have technical difficulties. We're questioning what's going on. So that's our show here. But welcome to our program.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. So I'm going to read your bio so that everyone will know who you are, and then we'll just start the discussion. Dr. Mary Cope and Dr. Megan Sprinkle are co-hosts of the Pet Industry Podcast, a podcast from BSM Partners, the largest independent pet nutrition and health consultant firm. Dr. Mary Cope has a PhD in animal nutrition. She is licensed welfare rehabilitator and falconer and is also very active in dog agility, herding, and conformation with her dogs Piper and Samson. Dr. Cope is also an expert in all things poultry and has a passion for backyard birds. Dr. Cope has much personal experience traveling with pets, from moving across the country to traveling every weekend for dog shows and even the transportation of livestock and exotics. Okay. Dr. Cope lives in upstate New York with her dogs, cat, falconry bird, and chickens. Dr. Sprinkle is a veterinarian and completed a veterinarian nutrition residency at the University of Missouri. She has since spent her career in the pet industry, understanding the many dimensions that go into nutrition and food for pets. She is the president of the American Academy of Veterinarian Nutrition. She is slightly obsessed with podcasts and podcasting, as she has her own podcast, Vet Life ReImagined, of which Dr. Nelva has been a hit guest. That addresses careers and wisdom in the veterinarian profession. She lives in Savannah, Georgia with her husband and Great Dane Eva. Everyone, please help us welcome Dr. Mary Cope and Dr. Megan Sprinkle.
Hey!
Thank you.
Definitely. Well, I'm excited you guys are here because, like I said, it's something, you're right. It's something that pet owners don't think about when they're traveling. I know, let's see, when you're traveling by air, they'll say you have to put a serving of food on top of the crate if they go by cargo, just in case something happens, you have to feed the animal. But outside of that, are pet owners thinking about further on? You know, we've got a little bit of food there for that purpose, but are they thinking about, are they packing food in their suitcases or, you know, for their pet? What are they doing? I mean, it's something to consider. Because again, you can't just take them to McDonald's or Burger King or what have you and think that they're gonna be perfectly fine. Because then you're gonna have the possibility of getting pancreatitis, vomiting and diarrhea, and a lethargic pet. So can't do that. So I love that you brought it up, Megan, and pushed it. Yes, there's a lot of things regarding nutrition that we need to consider for pet travel. So thank you for coming. And Mary, I haven't met you, but I think it's very interesting with your background. You've traveled too a lot.
Yes, I travel an enormous amount with my animals.
And you're in upstate New York. What part?
I'm in the Finger Lakes region around like Syracuse.
Got it. I'm originally from Newburgh, New York. That's where my family is.
Okay, downstate.
Yep.
Love to see it. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's actually where my dog's breeder is around the Newburgh area.
Wow, okay.
So we travel down there an enormous amount, buzz back and forth all the time.
Oh, good. But you're not traveling much by air. It's just more ground transportation and everything.
I have traveled by air. So with dog agility, if you qualify for either nationals or invitationals, those happen once a year and they change depending on the year of the location that they're in. So when the show was out in Long Beach, California, in 2009, that was not a drive that we were willing to make. Oh, yes. So we did fly. We did fly our dogs out for that.
Right. Well, good.
Have you ever taken your Falcon on the plane?
I have not. I've never flown a falconry bird before. However, I think we've all probably seen the viral pictures online of there's like in the Middle East, falconry
Yeah.
is huge, and there's some very
Yeah.
wealthy individuals who have
Yeah.
a large number of falcons. They'll rent out like a plane and they'll
Yeah,
fly like
that's
all their birds at one
that's
time.
that's very common with certain air lines over in that region.
Yep.
That they will automatically in cabin will have a falcon. And I guess they put a coverage over its head to calm it or something, but they said it's very common for that to happen. I haven't seen it yet. I definitely want to see that. Definitely want to see that.
It would be interesting to fly stateside with a bird of prey to see how they'd handle it, because I don't think it's nearly as common. So
right. No, normally here in the U.S., you would not be in cabin with a falcon. Not going to happen. You would have to go by cargo and then make sure everything meets the requirements there. But it will be very interesting to see one. I haven't seen you said if there's a meme out, I haven't seen that photo yet, a reference to that. But I would love to see it face to face.
Yes.
It'd be interesting. So Megan,
I would imagine a private jet with someone over here would take a private jet.
I can see that definitely, but not definitely a commercial airline. Never. Megan, dear, I did not know you were in Savannah.
Yes, I'm not far from you now. Actually, I was just in Atlanta last weekend, which brings me to say, so even after I wrote that bio, which was not that long ago, we have gotten another dog. And so we picked this dog up in Atlanta and then drove back. So this is a very relevant conversation because I just drove with a very large dog. She's a 9-month-old Great Dane. So I know very recently the challenges of driving with a pet, especially a large one. So there's a lot of things we can talk about for sure.
Awesome. Well,
fantastic.
If we can let's jump into some questions. Any questions yet, Greta? Potentially we can.
Yeah, there's quite a few. So I will pull this one up that they have. I don't know why my computer is not responding. Do you guys see a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, it's not on my screen for some reason. Okay, so the first one that I had pressed is, what should I feed my pet before and during traveling?
Yeah, so I can dive right in. So traveling for an animal, despite, I travel with my show dogs, like we were discussing, almost every weekend. And despite the frequency that we travel, it still stresses them. A lot of times they'll still, depending on how long of a trip it is, potentially get an upset stomach. So because it's a stressful event, traveling, no matter how much you do with your animal, is going to be stressful. The less change you can provide for them, the better. So whatever your dog or cat is doing well on and likes and is their normal diet, I would recommend that you stick with that diet before and during traveling. Now, in the same breath, if you want to try to introduce either a calming supplement or an immune boosting supplement, that is definitely an option to try and help mitigate some of the stressors that come along with traveling and any negative side effects. But I would recommend introducing those supplements prior to traveling, so that way if there are any negative side effects, you're not dealing with upset stomachs on the road.
Yeah, that would be the worst place for it to happen. How about one question just to maybe add on to here? I know a lot of the airlines will say, especially if they're traveling by cargo, I don't know if they say much for in cabin, but you should feed them at least 4 hours prior to travel, to a small meal 4 hours prior to. And actually, a lot of documentation, it's like an animal welfare regulation, actually, that you must you must state that and ensure that the pet has been fed at least 4 hours prior to travel. At least a small meal there, nothing huge and everything. What do you think about as far as car rides or whatever other suggestions you might have in reference to that?
So I really like the recommendation to feed them a little like 4 hours, a good chunk of time prior to traveling. So I have a smooth collie. And collies are one of the breeds, and Megan also has a breed that's very prone to this. They're very prone to something called bloat, which is, where the stomach can twist and it can cut off blood circulation to their intestines. It's a medical emergency. It can kill a dog very, very quickly. And stress increases the risk that your dog is going to bloat. So by feeding them prior to that stressful event and giving their stomach kind of time to digest a little bit and empty, if they do get sick, hopefully it's less, but you're also giving their body time to adjust to having food on board before you change their environment.
Greta, I don't know if you're aware of that. It's also called GDV, and bloating, gastric dilatation and volvulus, I believe it is. The stomach, everything twists and gas and everything builds up in the stomach, and there's no outlet because it twisted. So you can't burp it out. You can't further get it out your stomach, and it really is a medical emergency. So again, that's more the reason why you should feed them well beyond that trip, that stressful event, so that hopefully they'll get it digested and everything. This is also common in the breeds that you guys have. Say if you feed your pet and then let it go outside and run, oh my God, that's the worst thing you could do because it can twist its stomach. So, but yeah.
Yeah. And even less scary as that incident is just if you have that little bit of stress or nerves, or because this is going to be different depending on the pet. I have one dog that kind of doesn't travel super, super well, and then one who travels really well. But just that you can have a little bit of GI upset. And the last thing you want is like this ginormous meal right before. I mean, it's like you don't eat a bunch and then go on a roller coaster ride, right? Some people do, but you know what happens afterwards.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things too. So even just, car rides, kind of getting to know your pet. I think it's great to kind of practice, especially like when they're young, just do those little rides and kind of see how they do, get them a little bit used to it. So if you do have like maybe even a longer trip ahead of you and you know that's coming, you might want to practice with like shorter little trips to just kind of see how they do. And then I prefer the small meals, just so again, you just don't have that large amount of food in their stomach. So if they do get a little nauseous or upset, you don't have a lot of that coming back up, but they still have enough that, they're not going to get too hungry.
I love that you said that, Megan, because you're reminding me of something I did when I was a child, where I had a good meal and went on a roller coaster ride, and oh my God, that was the worst thing ever. I was so sick.
Yes.
So, but yeah, the whole event is stressful for them. And a side effect, same as with us. When we're nervous, sometimes things might come up. So a small meal, something very small, even if it's in cabin, a couple hours apart, a small meal will be helpful for them. And eating during, we eat during our trips as far as when we travel, but I don't think we eat a whole lot. So again, small meal is the best way to go for them.
For eating during, because whether it's a long flight or a long car ride, our pets, they get bored like we do, and we can't exactly toss them a coloring book to keep them busy during these travels. So if you prepare like a Kong or a top, I really like the topples because I feel like I can get them a lot cleaner than I can with a Kong, getting them in the dishwasher. But if you soak some of their food, this is primarily for dogs. I can't imagine a cat enjoying this nearly as much. But if you soak some of their kibble and get it soft and mush it into like a topple or a Kong and freeze it, the dog can then sit in the car and really work and lick and have something that's mentally engaging. And they're only getting small bits of food at a time, especially for these longer trips where, sure, you can feed them before you leave, but if you're going to be in the car for 18 hours, they're probably going to need a little extra something on their stomach at some point. So providing them that is not only giving them small bits of food slowly over time, but it's also giving them something to do. So hopefully you're not dealing with destructive behaviors or whining and crying. It'll keep them happy.
Definite.
That's a great thought. I mean, a great tip. And the tips that you all are sharing, I'm writing, and so I don't want you to think I'm not paying attention, but I want to create a flyer to share with everyone after this post. So I wanted to throw that out there. But since I'm the resident pet parent, so of course, you know that a lot of pet parents aren't thinking about what they need to prep with their nutrition. So they'll get somewhere and then they're like, okay, so what do we feed them? And unfortunately, I do know some pet parents that have rolled into McDonald's drive-through to grab a Happy Meal for their dog. Now, I don't suggest that they do that the entire vacation, but I have seen it done. So I know that's a bad habit, but, and of course, I'm thinking that dog probably had a stomach ache. So when the pet does get a stomach ache on the trip, what can the pet parent do to help them out? I hate to say this. I also know just because I know things don't mean I did it either. So I don't want you guys to think this. But I also know some pet parents that unfortunately have grabbed for the Pepto Bismol and gave them a couple drops. I did tell them not to do that, by the way. So, what do you recommend that a pet parent should do? I would imagine you'll say go to the nearest vet. But if is there any over-the-counter type medications? If there are, what do you recommend? If they are somewhere that might not carry their dog's food, what do you recommend? And I know there's like this huge, before a couple of years ago, there was this huge wave of people wanting to cook for their pets. Now, this was to be healthy. So if they're that parent, you know, what should they do for traveling and like bringing food that they've cooked? I know I just landed a whole bunch on you guys.
Well, I'll let you. Well, I'll start it, and I'm hoping you guys will chime in and agree with me. But I'm really big on not giving over-the-counter stuff for a pet. It scares me because sometimes with pets, even though okay, we could probably say, okay, if vomiting or diarrhea happens, we might know what it's related to. I still don't think pet parents should just go thinking that over-the-counter medication will solve the problem, because they may show those clinical signs, but what if those clinical signs are related to something else? So my first thought will be always seek veterinary care in reference to that, and definitely let the veterinarian know what they were exposed to. And trust me, I'm really a stickler on feeding pets where they shouldn't get something. They shouldn't get table food. I'm really strong on that. Trust me, I was at we had a Halloween party at work, and it was bring your dog to work day, and someone had a piece of cheese they were going to give to their dogs. Don't do that. And they was like, why not? It's like pancreatitis. Pancreatitis. I said, you don't want it. I said, because it can. I said, always say your pancreas is a great organ. It helps digest the food and everything great, but you don't want it to digest itself because you can't live without your pancreas. So you don't want it to happen. So I probably scare everybody. I don't mean to do it, but I'd rather you be worried about the potential and realize that it really is a significant disease and really actually can cause death ultimately. So no table food if you can. So again, that's why I love that you guys are here to tell us about nutrition during travel and all the things we can get them right on board. So I'm sorry, Greta. I know you always make that suggestion, and I always go back and say seek veterinary care is my first thought, because I just worry about folks thinking that there's one drug that can stop something, and it's not. Sometimes vomiting and diarrhea can happen, and Pepto Bismol can help, sorta. But what if they're dehydrated? They need fluids. Pepto Bismol also, last I remember, when it's digested, it comes out looking black and tarry. So that can actually mask if there's blood in the stool. So it's like.
And I actually recently found out that Pepto Bismol can create really interesting images on x-rays too.
Mhm.
So it can also confuse things there. So yeah, if your pet's having some vomiting and diarrhea, I think it's worth pulling out your smartphone and finding a veterinarian
Yeah.
to take a look. But yeah, I agree with you. And Dr. Cope and I were talking about this earlier is, you know, especially the fatty foods are really not good. And that's what you get when you go through the drive-throughs, or the French fries and the hamburgers and the chicken nuggets. So those are not really the best foods. It's really good to prepare as much as possible before the event. And Greta, you also asked about home cooked foods, which really gets challenging when you are traveling, because you're probably not going to have a whole lot of refrigeration options, or usually not a full kitchen to be prepping these meals for them. And so if you can prep, that's great. Bring your cooler and make sure that you've got ice packs, but that's usually pretty hard to do. And so back to what, Dr. Cope was talking about is, if you know that's coming and you're not going to be able to feed the fresh foods, is finding something that you can start introducing prior to the trip to get them used to it, so that while they're on the trip, they can be on that. And then again, slowly adapt coming back home. But I agree with Dr. Nelva. I'm not a big fan of the over-the-counter things too. It's just, that's not how we have it yet. Maybe one day we'll have a pet over-the-counter pharmacy where we feel a little more comfortable. But everything is designed for people, and people are very different than pets. So yeah, I think right now that's the best thing that we can recommend.
Absolutely.
From my viewpoint, I 100% agree that over-the-counter medications, there's so much room for error with our pets, and hurting them. And it's always so tragic whenever, whether it's wildlife or people's pets, and I see them try to make a good decision. The intention is to help the animal, and then they end up causing harm. And that's just always so heartbreaking. So you're best off, even if it's just a phone call to consult a veterinarian while you're traveling. That's definitely what one should do if their pet is having severe GI upset. As far as the feeding of human foods goes, in a perfect world, obviously, we wouldn't be feeding our pets fast food or through drive-thrus, but we don't live in a perfect world, and people are going to, and I know that they're going to. So if someone feels like they have no other alternative, let's say all the pet stores are closed around them, there's no food available, you can at least avoid like the fried foods. That your dog does not need the greasy French fries. If you're going to give them a hamburger, maybe we forego the bun and the cheese and we just stick to the meat portion of it. If let's say you have Chick-fil-A, if you go for grilled versus the fried chicken nuggets, like there are ways that you can at least minimize harm. So you're probably not going to cause your dog a great deal of harm by feeding them a hamburger patty or a plain chicken product. So if you're in a pinch and you absolutely have to, just try to make the choices that are not going to hopefully lead to pancreatitis by feeding them an extra large McDonald's fry. So that's my best piece of advice for understanding that we don't live in that perfect world where everyone has their food packed and ready to go.
I have two more questions, and then we can move on. But just to come back to what you guys were saying, so with the fresh foods, people food. I see a lot now. I don't own a dog. I've had dogs growing up, but I don't own a dog now, and things are different between now and back then. Back then, we used to feed them Alpo, and that doesn't exist anymore. But okay, so there's a lot of people I see that feed their dogs vegetables and fruits. So would you suggest, like, even if they don't, maybe some of the vegetables might transport well, like carrots, but they can pick a lot of this stuff up where they end up. Do you recommend that people, while they're traveling, and I'm thinking because of stress, and vegetables grow differently in different areas, and fruit. Do you suggest that they still feed them what they're used to as far as fruits and vegetables in other countries while they're on their trips, or just forget about doing that part while they're traveling?
So that's actually a super interesting question and kind of line of thought. I wouldn't be worried about a lot of variability in produce, just because even if you're shopping, I guess unless you're going to your local farmer's market and that's the only place that you're sourcing your produce from. If you go to any large chain grocery store and you read the packages on the fruits and vegetables, they're all imported. And even if they are even if the growing conditions are different, the variability is probably only going to be plus or minus 5% on your macronutrients. And even that would be, I'm thinking soybeans and corn here. Less so carrots and broccoli. I personally wouldn't think that would create enough variability in the diet that there would be a huge difference as long as you're getting the same vegetables. Now, if your dog's accustomed to getting strawberries here and you go overseas and suddenly you're now feeding them papaya and mango, that's a big change. But a strawberry here and a strawberry elsewhere is going to be a strawberry. So I wouldn't think, as long as you're sticking with the same species of fruit and vegetable, that there would be a lot there. But Megan, Dr. Schmigel, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think in general, if it's temporary, right, that it's probably going to be pretty comparable if you're getting the same foods. The only thing that I could think of is, I don't know, I'm with you, Dr. Cope. I think this is an interesting question on if I went to a whole nother country, is the water different? I'm thinking about that too. Even for us, right, there's some countries where we don't need to drink out of the tap. Is that same for our pets?
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I haven't sat and thought about that question. So I think it's a great question.
That's why I was asking, because our water is filtered. And you go over to, and every country has fruit.
Yeah.
So it's can we trust the water it's growing out of or the ground it's growing out of?
Well, even as far as the water conversation goes, I know a lot of dog show people that will, if they're driving somewhere, they will bring water from home with them. And that's because if your animal is accustomed to well water and suddenly they're on city water that's chlorinated, they might not want to drink it. It smells different. It simply tastes different. And if you have a picky eater, they're going to go, nope, it's too different. I can't. It's trying to poison me. So they'll bring their own water with them. So the water thing is definitely a good point to bring up when traveling. You may be better off to just purchase a gallon of water, filtered water, wherever you land, just to avoid, the potential that your dog, I would worry about my pet not drinking. That's far more serious of an issue than, not eating for a couple days. Dehydration is definitely something to be concerned about. So that's a good point to bring up about the water.
That is good.
And we've talked a lot about dogs. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the other one is, I see everybody thinks it's so cute that their dog has a puppuccino, but I'm wondering, is whipped milk really, is that really good for your dog? Because I was I would have gas for days. I don't know if I could. So I was just wondering, as veterinarians, do you all think that that's something good for your dog?
The vets, I can tell you right now, the vets are going to say no. I don't have my DPM. I'm just a nutritionist. I have my PhD in nutrition, but I tend to have a more realistic view of this world, and the way that people view their pets. So people view their pets like their kids, and they want to spoil them, and they want to give them tasty things. And the puppuccino is an experience, right? You get to go through the drive-through and order, and your dog is so excited because they know they're getting a special treat. And it's not good for your dog. I'm going to throw it out there. Dogs are lactose intolerant. cream has lactose. They don't need the sugar. However, ice cream is not good for us either, and we do indulge. I would not get a puppuccino while traveling where it's already stressful for your pet. But every once in a blue moon on like a special occasion, this should not be a daily occurrence. If you want to have like on their birthday or a special holiday, you're probably not going to harm your animal by giving them the little shot glass of what is it? Little espresso cup.
Is it whipped cream or what is it? I always wonder what is
It's
it?
whipped milk.
Yeah.
It's whipped
Although,
milk.
if I can put this out into the universe, if someone from Starbucks is listening to this, I would love to work with you, and maybe we could come up with something that is a little more pet friendly. So please reach out to us, and
Yes.
we can come up with a treat.
Very good.
Still a treat, but a little more veterinary approved.
Yeah, dog friendly, pet friendly, and it geared towards so it doesn't cause an upset stomach to them, because there are some people that will complain after getting these that their pet got sick, was not feeling well afterwards. So
I mean, the other thing
that's more amenable to pets, not, of course they love our food, of course.
Yes, it's very tasty.
Yeah.
The other thing is, do you have an 80-pound Great Dane or do you have a 5-pound Papillon? Because that little espresso cup that's a lot different of a volume body size for that little 5-pound Papillon versus the 80-pound Great Dane. So take that into account too. If you have a tiny dog, they don't need the whole cup. Just scoop a little on your finger, give them a lick, and then they're done.
Right.
But speaking of dog-friendly things, my mom just traveled up to Vermont to Ben & Jerry's headquarters, and they actually have dog ice cream that they make. And I thought that was so nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Is something really cool about what Dr. Cope and I do is, again, as Greta said in our intro, is that we work for a consulting company. And so it is really cool to see the different types of products that are created and actually be a participant in those as well. Yeah. So again, I am serious, Starbucks, if you're listening, but yeah, I agree. I love how Dr. Cope is saying, just looking at the real world, because we are nutritionists, but we are also pet parents, and we also like treating our pets, and we like the experience. We completely get it, because we are 100% pet parents too. And so I love this conversation, because it does allow us to kind of think about some of these things, and maybe if we just plant the idea now, maybe you can kind of prepare ahead of time. It's like, how can I have a really unique experience with my pet, have this, human animal bond moment, but make it a little bit, a pet centered, and what can we do about making it as healthy as possible for our pets? So yeah, thanks so much.
Yep, but it's interesting. We also need to start making more healthy choices as well. So, I mean, I hate to say it, I'm of an age where I'm losing high school classmates and everything for various diseases, diabetes, heart disease, and what have you, and it all stems from your diet. So we all actually need to be making healthier choices too. So that will be helpful. So hey, look, what I'm trying to do with my dog, and actually I'm really excited what I did with her. My girl is an American Bulldog. She's sleeping behind me. She had gotten up to 90 pounds, which is awful for her size, because number one, she also has bad knees. So I decided to put her on a diet, which I wish somebody would put me on a diet too sometimes, but put her on a diet. And I gave her kibble, a good brand. I believe it's a good brand. And I'd use cherry tomatoes, diced apples. I might chop up a boiled egg, and I've been feeding her that. And she is down to like 76 pounds now. I'm there, and that's about a year really working on her. And it works. And I did it the healthy way. Whenever she wants a treat, I'll pull out some cherry tomatoes. Here you go. So she gets.
Yeah, I think it's hard.
I'm trying to think what candy did we have that's burst in your mouth? Just burst in her mouth, and she loves it. So it can happen. We can all make healthier choices for our pets and for ourselves, basically.
With it getting into the winter months, a lot of people are going to be less active. I know we definitely will once we get snow on the ground with their pets. So now is a great time. Not travel related, but just a PSA. Now's a great time to start looking for a lower calorie option for the winter months. So if whatever brand you're feeding your pet, look to see if they have a lower calorie, alternative in their line, and you can switch over to that for the winter months. And then once you get more active in the summer, you can always increase the volume or switch back to a higher calorie food.
Yeah.
And on that, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add, the thing I was just going to mention is that also, I mean, it's part of nutrition is trying to maintain your pet's weight at the ideal weight too is best. I know when I do practice, I don't that much, but when I do, the dog is overweight, and I always say you can't feed them for the weight that they are. You have to feed them probably almost the same premise behind us, less calories in, increase the exercise, and the weight will come off. But if you keep maintaining their diet at, say the pet is 50 pounds and you're feeding them for a 50-pound dog, what do you think you're going to get? So you have to start thinking about all those things with that. So tell me your thoughts on nutrition, and because again, and that does impact travel if you think about it, because if they're overweight, they're prone to overheating a lot of times during the summertime. So something to consider. I think it's important.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, we were talking about, maybe pets with health concerns, and I see that question up as well as, allergies. So whether it is, you're feeding a special diet because of you're trying to lose weight, which Mary had brought this up in a previous conversation. When you are traveling, think about what you will be doing on that trip. You might be going to travel and hike for quite a bit of the trip. And if you're asking your dog to be increasing in activity, you might want to account for that. If you're trying to, food prep, they may need a little extra calories if you are going to be hiking the entire time. On the flip side, if you're going to be standing or sitting in a car most of the time, or, sitting in a cabin most of the time where they're not going to be very active, they may not need as many calories. So, whether the activity level, all of these things will go into how many calories your pet needs. So I think those are also, not to give so many thoughts on this, but again, this is what we do. So, to prepare for that as well. But for allergies, as an example, most of these pets are going to really need a very specific and strict diet. So all the more reason to be as prepared as possible and work with your veterinarian. This is another thing I want to throw out there is you and your veterinarian are the two people who know your pet the best. And so if you know you're about to go travel somewhere, I think it's great to have a conversation with your pet's healthcare team, and especially if they have a health concern, and say, hey, this is, where we're going, what we're doing, what should we do to prepare for this, especially when it comes to their food. And then you can work with them to create this very special plan for them. So again, with allergies, they're going to be on special diets. They definitely take the treats that that they do well with. I'm okay with treats as long as we vetted them and we know that they do well on them, because not all pets are going to actually want to eat as much when they travel. I have those dogs. They get very distracted because there's a new environment. There's, probably a little anxiety with just the transportation part of things. And so having these high reward, maybe low calorie treats that you've already tried with them, they do well with them, I think will also be helpful when you travel, whether it's to try to, because we want to make these experiences very positive for our pets. The last thing is we want to traumatize them in, transportation and travel. So we really want to make this as positive of an experience as possible. So those are just some thoughts. Again, with any type of health concern, if your pet needs to lose weight, if they have allergies or diabetes, especially if they have diabetes, any other health concern, those are things that, work with your veterinarian on, try to prepare as much as possible. And I know things happen in life and we can always have backup plans, but I think those are a few things that you can do.
I definitely agree on that one. I always say, again, one thing as far as pet travel, a lot of times pet owners I feel like a lot of times, and it's just saying traveling by air. A lot of times they may want to travel with their pet and they treat their pet almost as a tag along. instead of really treating them as they're really a participant, because you need to know their health. What's their medical history? Are there any concerns for this travel with them being on, traveling with you? All those things you need to discuss with your veterinarian prior to travel to ensure it's in the best interest for your pet. If your pet has an underlying condition, you mentioned diabetes. I really wouldn't, if I could help it, maybe it'd be different by car, but by air, I don't think I want my diabetic dog or cat to travel because it's very stressful. And the worst case scenario, I don't need them to have a reaction, a negative impact on them medically during travel. Then also you got to consider the pets with, say, cardiovascular disease. Same as I always say, but my doctor says if I have a heart condition, I can't fly. Your pet shouldn't be flying either if they have an underlying heart disease. So these are questions and things to consider. Nutrition, definitely. But also, again, just review the medical history of the pet prior to travel to make sure it's in their best interest.
Yeah, I think you and I talked about that, Dr. Nelva, when you were on my podcast episode, because that's not something that is going to be on the paperwork that is required for your pet to travel.
Right.
I know that sounds kind of sad and like, what? But that's another thing to talk to your veterinarian about, is not just are they up to date on vaccines, but really the overall health and even behavior, right? That if you have a really high anxiety pet, is that the best thing? You may not have a lot of options, but talk about that. Maybe they need a little sedation or something, right? Kind of looking at your pet in entirety before you travel, I think is super important.
Definitely. And I believe, Dr. Mary, you mentioned calming chews or those. I'm not big on sedation. Actually, one medication that I wonder your thoughts on this. What do you think of Serenia for controlling vomiting, motion sickness in pets for travel? What do you think of that?
I love Serenia. I was in the Serenia vet group where I loved giving it as a preventative for all anesthesia procedures. I'm a big fan of Serenia there. I would have to refresh myself on any type of research when it comes to using it for travel purposes. But I do happen to be a big fan of Serenia. So you wouldn't have to twist my arm on that one.
I think that would, for motion sickness, I know that's used primarily for that. So who knows, for long car rides, that might be something that folks could utilize too.
Maybe. Yeah, absolutely. But again, individual pet, working with your healthcare team, trying to figure out what's best at the time. I promise there are options. It's just about having that conversation and absolutely.
Yeah, there definitely are calming chews out there that have nutraceutical properties to them that have been shown to be effective at proper dosages. So if you're going to supplement your pet, always follow the directions on the label. You can do some research into the actives that are in there to ensure that it's the active that you're wanting for the calming purposes. You can always bounce them off of your veterinarian prior to giving them. Consult with them, see if they have any recommendations of good calming products for cats. I know I just kind of innately gravitate to dogs, so that's what I've traveled the most with. But for cats, Dr. Sprinkle had brought up in one of our conversations the Feel Away spray. Spray the carriers with Feel Away. Also for cats, I have a cat myself. She's wonderful, but I will bring her carrier out and just leave it hanging out in the kitchen and give her treats in the carrier every once in a while, just so that way they don't associate the carrier coming out with travel, because they can get very stressed, and as cats are sensitive, and stress can lead to urinary problems and not wanting to eat and behavioral issues. And I can think of no more stressful way to start a trip than to see your carrier come out, run and hide, have your human chase you down, drag you out, and shove you in a carrier. That seems like the most traumatizing thing for a poor little kitty cat. So if you can create positive associations with the things that your animals are going to experience during travel, it can hopefully help to, at the very least minimize stress and not add to it.
I love it. I love that you said that. Basically, you're telling us steps to how to acclimate your cat to their carrier, basically.
Yep.
And it could work the same for your dogs as well. But have the crate out well in advance of your travel plans, so that they can get comfortable going inside of it and everything. Because that's going to take a lot of stress off of them, and they're not feeling like it's a punishment either. It's like, oh, good things happen in here. I get treats in here. Great things happen here. So positive association with it is what we need for them to kind of relax. And after a while, that could be almost like a safe haven for them. We're like, hey, this is my safety spot. So it makes sense. Yeah.
Are there treats that you guys recommend for taking on the trips?
I talked a little bit about this, but so Mary, did you want to go ahead and add?
Sure. So for all animals, I recommend you try the treat before you go on the trip to make sure that it's settling well with your pet's digestive system. While we're kind of on the topic of cats, I think that the lickable treats are really fantastic. For cats, you can put them on a little lick mat, which would kind of be the equivalent of the Kong or the Topple for your dog. So you could put the lickable treat on a lick mat for your cat to lick in the carrier. Additionally, I don't tend to get super worried when dogs don't eat for a few days. I cannot say the same for cats who go on hunger strike. I don't want to see a cat not eat. So even if you can find a lickable treat that's complete and balanced, that's wonderful. Even if you can't, I would rather your cat eat 2, 3, 4 lickable treats and have something on their stomach than go on hunger strike. They won't eat their kibble or their canned or whatever you feed your cat. They won't eat that. So you're like, well, I guess they're not going to eat the food and not have anything on their tummies. So find a high value treat that your especially cat really likes. So that way, and pack lots of them. So that way, hopefully on your trip, you can get something in on their little kitty cat stomachs.
Definitely. I love that you said that, because a lot of folks don't realize when cats don't eat, that's really a bad thing. They can get fatty liver and cause a load of problems with them trying to get them back to eating. So, and actually it can become a medical emergency, the fact that they're not eating. So you want to make sure that that's supplied for them at all times, and everything.
And cats are, for being so fragile with not eating, they are so picky. They can be. I've known some cats that are not picky at all. But like my cat will turn her nose up at something and it's like, ma'am, you cannot afford to be picky like this. You need to eat.
Yes. Very sensitive. Oh, just a side note thought of cats traveling, because I've known someone, I've seen situations where people have done this and it's a big no-no. If you're transporting your cat by cargo, a lot of folks pet owners think they should put the litter box inside the crate with their pet, but that's not allowed. FYI, that's not allowed. I have seen it happen, and I've seen a tremendous mess because of transport and kitty litter everywhere. It's not allowed, and I don't think they would even actually utilize it during travel. So just FYI, one of the things that's not allowed inside a crate for most airlines, if you're traveling by cargo, they're not going to allow you to put a kitty litter box in there. So that's a big no-no.
Can you use I know even in a hospital setting, we'll rip up paper or something like that for them, or do they have anything, or just no box, no nothing?
No box in there.
No nothing.
Nope.
You can probably, if you are going to travel, I love the pee pads or
probably those would be ideal, but the actual box itself inside there, because you think about it, most of the cat carriers, they're just really big enough for that cat in there. Imagine if you put a litter box in there, unless you're going to get a really big container, and folks usually don't do that for cats. So, yeah.
But if you're going to have the pee pads or the hospital trucks, as my mom calls them, bring extra with you, so that way if your cat does use them, you can ball it up, put it in the bag, throw it away, and put a new one in for your cat. Because the other thing about cats is that they tend to be meticulous, and so it's very stressful for them to have to sit in their potty. If
yeah.
Understandable.
I hate to say it for cats. I'm sorry, Greta, but I think one of the worst smelling poops ever is a cat's. Yikes! So I'm sorry. I should have said that, but that's my opinion on it. That's awful. So yeah, get that, clean it, and get it out of the way. They don't like it. We don't either. But keep it clean for them. Yeah.
Absolutely. These are all great tips, and I love that Dr. Mary said bring the pee pads because not a lot of cat parents think of the pee pads for cats. So that's a huge tip. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Are there any specific travel-friendly pet foods that are available or that you can recommend?
So some brands actually make like smaller bags, which would be easy to take on the road. However, they are going to be expensive and more of a markup. Or they also make like little single serving, like either cans or pouches. For a canned or pouched product, I think the single serving options are fantastic because you can peel the lid back, give your pet their food and throw away the container, because obviously you can't open up, like if you're on the go and say you have a cat and an 8-ounce can of food, they're probably not going to eat all 8 of those ounces at once. And if you don't have access to refrigeration, you have to throw it out. It's not going to last. For kibble products, I from dog showing have gotten lots of the little individual bags as like samples. But like I said, the markup for smaller bags is going to be quite high. So I personally, what I like to do is I pre-measure the amount that they get per meal. I put it in a little Ziploc bag, and those are what I take with me. I do a lot of like hiking and camping, and so those are really nice because then you don't have to worry about taking an extra cup. You just have your prepackaged meals. You can toss them in a bag with you. You leave majority of it in the car, toss what you need, and then go. So that's what I would recommend. As far as, kibbles that are formulated for travel, I personally am not super aware of anything out there. Like I said, just stick with what you know, stick with what your pet likes. And if you're accustomed to feeding big cans or big quantities of things that aren't going to keep without refrigeration, I'd opt for the smaller sizes of those things that equate to a serving.
Okay. I've seen a lot of people pre-measure the dry kibble. I actually heard a lot of traveling pet parents prefer to take the dry kibble over wet. But I'm glad that you suggest. I don't think a lot of people know that you can get this travel package type single serving wet food as well. So that's good to know.
The only call out I'm going to make for the kibble in the Ziploc bags is if you are going to be somewhere hot and or sunny, please take your kibble into wherever you're staying with you. Don't leave your kibble to sit and bake in a hot car or direct sunlight, because that's going to cause the fat to oxidize faster and it'll cause the kibble to spoil. So keep your kibble in a cool, dry, dark location.
See, that's something that I wouldn't even think about. It does. It will. Just you wouldn't think about that. So great tip there.
I can imagine people leaving it in the car and stuff. So that's a great tip.
Yep.
And the only thing I'll add with the canned products, we talked a little bit about water earlier, but sometimes getting pets to drink water while you travel, it can be a challenge. I know with my dogs, I actually have to get the stainless steel bowls very intentionally, because with plastic or other types of bowls, they actually break out on their chin. And so the travel anxiety, the having to use very specific bowls, sometimes getting water into dogs, but also especially cats too, they're hard enough to get them to drink water sometimes. there are some advantages of having a canned product, again, especially for cats, because they get a lot of that water that they need for their body to function in that canned food. So just another, I know it smells and it's heavier and not as easy, but for some of these pets, it might not be bad to have at least some of those just for those types of situations. But yeah, by all means, kibble is definitely the easiest thing to travel with.
So what are some tips that you ladies can all give for the pets that refuse to eat while traveling?
I've had some of those. Again, I have the very high needy Great Dane dogs, and so again, back to the bringing those high value treats and things that you can encourage them to eat. Also, I've tried to protect my dog to have some quiet time, and she's one she doesn't like to be looked at when she eats. She, again, high maintenance dog. So just try to think about those things. Your dog, right? Even at home, like what are the uniquenesses that they have around eating? And just when you're traveling, what can we do to try to make that as smooth and as easy as possible? We've talked a little bit about those like high value treats or the foods that we know are going to be highly palatable to them or are highly tasty. Sorry, not everybody uses palatable. So, again, thinking about those things and having those along board, maybe use them as a topper. I've done that with my dogs before. Is just even if you mix it in with the regular food, it'll encourage them to eat the full food. So those are just a few things that come to my mind.
Yeah. So especially for a dry product, some things that can help entice animals to eat. So for both dogs and cats, the sense of smell it's highly linked, as we know, with like, if you get a cold or a stuffy nose, your sense of taste goes down. So smell and taste are very strongly linked. And the two things that will help to increase the smelliness of food would be moisture and heat. So if you can add water, preferably warm water, to a food, that can help to entice an animal to eat. Toppers are a great option, but then also they make like broths, which would add that moisture, but they also smell strong. If you are flying where you can't bring, a liquid product with you, they do make powdered kind of broth powders that you can add to the food and then add warm water on top, which will still give you the nice smelly broth aroma. But that way you don't have to worry about traveling with a liquid. But for dogs, definitely would recommend that. For cats, you can squirt the lickable treats that we were talking about earlier on top of their food. They just know what your animal like loves, and just see if you can mix that in with their food to entice them to eat.
And Dr. Cope is actually talking about pet-specific broths.
Yes,
so I do caution people, you have to be very careful with like people products when it comes to broths, because sometimes they're high in sodium or they have like onions and garlic that we don't really want dogs to be eating. So they do have some pet-specific products as well. So, I mean, hey, if you like to have treats and try things with your pets, and before you travel, see if they, get one of those options, try it out, see if they like it, and then you have something in your back pocket when you travel in the future.
That's great. Well, there's a lot of our conversation. We had a lot of questions that you guys had sent over, but just through conversation, you hit so many, and the ones that you didn't, I added up on the screen. But is there anything we didn't talk about that you ladies would like to bring up now to review before we end the show?
I think we've covered a lot of ground. I'd say if you have the real key here is try things before you travel, before you're in that stressful location, because if your dog is going to have any GI upset, the stress from traveling is only going to exacerbate that problem and make it that much worse. And then also, it's going to be much harder to isolate whether while traveling, whether it's the new product that's causing the GI upset or if it's the travel that's causing the GI upset. So if you're at home and dog and cat are doing normal, they're fine, and you introduce a new product and suddenly our tummies are unhappy, you know it's the new product and we should not be using that again. Versus, they're fine with the product, you introduce it, they still get an upset stomach, it's probably due to stress related to traveling. So I think that that's really a key there. And then just keep things as consistent as possible. If your pet is accustomed to a routine where they eat at 7 a.m. and 5 p.m., try to maintain that, even if the meals are smaller, or you have to feed smaller meals throughout the course of the day. Just try to stick to that schedule, because the last thing you want to do is introduce more change to their lives during a stressful time.
Yeah. Ooh, to your point, I'm gonna just ask this real quick question on something you just said. Okay, schedules. So I'm on the East Coast, and let's say my dog eats dinner at 4:30 p.m. EST every day, and I will make it simple, and I go out to California with my dog. We get out there. So am I now feeding him at, what is it? Okay, I got to do my math here. So am I now feeding him at 1, or am I feeding him at 4?
It'd be much later. Or I see what you're saying. It would either be like 7 our time, or like 4 California time, or 1 California time, or 4 our time.
Yeah.
I would try to feed at least for the first couple of days. We've all, if you've traveled like that before, you know that, at 2 p.m. in California, if I'm from New York, I'm starting to get like a little hungry. At like 5, 6 p.m., I'm starting to get tired, just because the clock changes, our routines and our bodies don't. So I think what I would do as a pet owner, and what I would kind of recommend people do, is if you're going to make a big change like that, I would just implement that change over a few days. So, the first day that you're out there, stick to East Coast time and just feed them on East Coast time. And then maybe the next day you feed them 45 minutes to an hour later. So you're slowly getting closer and closer to that California time or West Coast time. And then, if you just slowly make that change over the course of 3 to 4 days, you'll be on West Coast time. And then when you fly back east, you can slowly implement that change again. It's the same mindset as introducing a new food, where, you do a quarter of their portion of the new food and 75% old, and then a couple days later 50-50, and slowly do that transition over. That's what I would recommend, just because I don't think that everyone wants to be getting up at 3 a.m. to feed their dog every day in California. But if your dog starts whining at 3:30, it's because their body is saying, I'm really hungry. It's breakfast time. And so maybe you get up in the morning and you feed them half of their breakfast at 3:30 and the other half at 7, and just slowly switch them over that way. But I would try to do that slowly for them.
And these are general principles, right? Dr. Cope kind of mentioned this. It's not that we're saying you need to get up at 3 a.m. to feed your pet. It's probably a little bit like yourself too. So, instead of a very strict time, if they are accustomed to getting fed within 30 minutes of you waking up, then you can kind of stick to that as you travel also, to California time. You're probably going to get up similarly. So again, these are general guidelines. It's a general idea of, we want to try to keep things as consistent as possible. Sticking back to Dr. Cope, the real reality of the world and the situation that you're in. So again, we don't want anybody to stress out about that. It's just very general. Yeah.
Well, that was great.
Perfect. Well, guys, we have gone way over today because it's so interesting.
I know.
Great conversation and just learning a lot of things that didn't really think about. So I'm hoping today,
Absolutely.
followers, you found it very interesting and got some great tips, I'm sure. And Greta, you'll share the tips over the next few days with everyone. But I think this is really good, very valuable. So thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
We tried to focus on travel, but we can talk about nutrition forever. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. We'd love to hear your travel experiences or any questions that you have. And I'm sure Greta and Dr. Nelva will give those to us, and we're happy to follow up.
Absolutely.
And I hope you do hear from Starbucks, because there needs to be a positive way that we can give our pets treats, but we want to make sure it's healthy for them too, and we have to recognize that. So hopefully they'll reach out to you.
Thank you so much.
Well, I want to tell everyone, all of our followers, that they should definitely go to listen to your podcast, Vet ReImagined. On our website, on the tab Dr. Nelva Speaks, you'll be able to find the link to the interview that Dr. Bryant did on Vet ReImagined, and it'll be able to take you to their podcast so that you can sign up and get to it on a regular basis. So I just wanted to share that with everyone as well.
Yeah, so that one is definitely check out Dr. Nelva's episode. It's fantastic. But if you want a little bit more about behind the scenes of the pet industry in general, both Dr. Cope and I are wearing our shirts. So we are both the co-hosts of the Pet Industry podcast as well. So we love to take behind the scenes. We do talk a lot about nutrition because that's a big part of what we do. But it's a lot of different things about what goes on in the pet industry, probably things you don't think about, but then probably a lot of questions you may have as well. So we would love it if people could come and follow over there. And again, we love to hear your questions and what you'd like to hear. So definitely check that one out as well.
Awesome.
If you could send me, let's see, I guess the link or any emails for that, what I'll do is put that in a flyer along with your other contact information so that everybody will have in one place where to follow you guys.
Sure thing. Thanks so much.
Okay. Well, thank you both for joining us. We will have to have you back because this was such an amazing topic that just spun into so much other information. And we tried to cover it all in an hour, but it was not possible. So we definitely got to bring you back in 2024.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Be happy to come back.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Yes. Bye-bye. End the stream. Dr. Bryant, does it look like it's off? Is it